Life is strange. It seems with the burnings taking place these days and the reflexive rise of more conservative groups, the actions of social justice advocates have taken the spotlight, apparently being given the dubious title of regressive left. I mischaracterized the term when I first heard it. I assumed it referred to declining competence of American millennials, falling behind in earning potential, and even the ability to solve simple problems or follow basic instructions. Of course, I Urban Dictionary'd regressive left and found it actually related to something else entirely. I've made the observation such debates often end with both sides wandering away with a sense of self-righteousness, and I don't often bother debating things that are so subject to passion. The fact people being educated have reduced earning power and reduced mental capability is less open to interpretation about if it's a good thing. I find regression of skills is an easier debate to keep on point. I attended college at one of these facilities in California for a business administration degree, but to get it, I was required to take several social studies classes, women's studies, cultural anthropology. In one case, a subject was why it was disrespectful to the Yanomamo to offer them medicine because it wrongly treated their jungle remedies and medicine men as having inferior medical technology. Many of my classmates were majoring in gender studies, women's history, that sort of thing. Nearly all identified as feminists, but I passed the classes despite maintaining positions that were unpopular in such company, and had some success persuading people I was correct. I'm told this is apparently something of a minor feat and fairly unusual in the current debate sphere. So I thought perhaps I would share my experiences bridging the divide that so often takes place these days. Maybe some good can come of it. I had the most success bringing social justice advocates and those opposed to the table by highlighting economic and logistical challenges they hadn't thought to address. Education in the United States is becoming so poor, even for relatively well-off people. Many are entering and exiting college with severely limited economic knowledge or problem-solving skills for logistical challenges, which is not an issue confined solely to people getting gender studies degrees. My point is education in the USA sucks, and that has consequences for everybody, and usually both sides can come to agree on this point. The narrative that is being pushed at these schools, or at least was in my case, is often one of cultural relativism. The way of life of a tribe is just as worthy of respect as a Westerner's way of life. Neither one is really better than the other, but the statement is taken to literal extensions, i.e. their medical technology is also just as good. When I had to defend the position of Western medical supremacy, the narrative the class had was the Yanomamo would not benefit from Western medicine. The Yanomamo had jungle remedies and medicine men. Therefore, Western medicine wrongfully disregards the Yanomamo's medical practices. On the surface, part of the claim is true. The Yanomamo do have healing rituals and the like. However, if you took 100,000 people in medical need and offered to cover all expenses, how many would travel to receive Yanomamo healing rituals versus how many would want treatment in Japan or Norway, for example? And how would these treatment numbers be impacted if medical needs were somewhat random and not necessarily on the Yanomamo treatment list? With most of the narratives pushed by social justice advocates, there's on a simplistic level some amount of truth. Yes, the Yanomamo do have healing rituals and the like. However, this doesn't mean they can treat the number of conditions comparable to Western medical care at equivalent success rates, etc. It's not about a single case, it's about rate of cases. The first thing anyone learns about economics is supply and demand. The rate of supply and the rate of demand determine the rate of price. It's not completely impossible to pick up a $100 pair of shoes at a yard sale for the price of $1. It's just less likely. Explaining the impact of economics and logistics I found to be the most effective way of bringing people to the table, because so many people are so badly educated about it, and there's exacerbation as to why. In some cases, the narrative of relativism that is pushed in these courses marginalizes the importance of economics and will sometimes misframe the capabilities of one system or another, or at least that was the case in the classes I took. It's treated as an otherwise minor concern for a factory administrator, not a pressing issue for the common person. In fact, it's marginalized to such a degree, I'd say the cases where I failed to sway majority opinion were often a result of presenting an economic challenge that was outright rejected. The first thing I ask of someone getting a gender studies degree is, why did you choose that degree? The answer is usually, I wanted to fight for equal rights or better understanding of inequality, something along those lines, to which I respond, okay, I didn't get that option. My choice was limited to what kind of business degree I wanted because I only got to attend college because I qualified for a grant because I was poor. So by your own standard of privilege, you had the privilege of selecting your degree from a wider array than I did. Most of the people obtaining gender studies degrees and the like that I've met weren't financially pressured to obtain a degree that will bring in more income. Most came from relatively comfortable upper-middle-class backgrounds and had little economic or logistical knowledge, and in said conditions there's less incentive to develop that field on one's own. As such, some relegated economics to be unimportant, in some cases to the extent that making economic arguments was sometimes viewed as nitpicking, being obsessive over trivial matters, or trying to find flaws due to prejudiced motive. When my anthropology class decided tribes didn't need Western medicine, the argument was that they had medicine and they didn't need it. Therefore, mischaracterizing Western medicine as better was a form of prejudice. An indigenous tribe may have some remedies, which may or may not work in certain cases, which may or may not have viable success rates. That doesn't mean it provides by the hundreds of thousands for appropriately varying needs across a massive infrastructure. One of the most common criticisms those opposed to social justice advocates tend to use is the focus on first world problems, quote-unquote. Why would you care about funding Sarkeesian when you can instead focus on starving kids in Africa? In fact, this was the main point in the counter-campaign launched by The Amazing Atheist recently. As it turns out, this showed up on the Gamergazi Reddit. The comments I found to answer that question essentially made the statement, just because there's another issue that's worse doesn't mean you're not entitled to desire improved conditions. Several declared Sarkeesian to be oppressed and claimed that because her suffering isn't as bad as starvation, it's still suffering. Or declared, depending on your skin color, that doesn't apply and certain categories should be racially considered off limits. I would agree just because you're not starving doesn't mean it's good to eat McDonald's all day. However, as with everything, economics and logistics come into play. The fight against the patriarchy, as it was portrayed to me in school, was basically a progress bar. At the end of the bar, the patriarchy is vanquished, happy ending. And each step against the patriarchy was meaningful progress on the bar. That's why it was okay to focus on issues that would be considered a first world problem, because it would still meaningfully move things in the right direction. However, when I asked people how they prioritized filling the bar, usually the answer I received was they didn't, or they focused on things they saw in their own lives. One of the more common debate points fielded by social justice advocates are sayings like, it's impossible for the oppressor to be the oppressed, and it's impossible for the oppressed to be the oppressor. Women can't be sexist, blacks can't be racist, etc.
But it's impossible for the oppressor to be the oppressed.
Ooh, that's embarrassing. That's cringy.
This narrative is based on a one-dimensional social relationship. A slave on a plantation can't possibly oppress a master. Looked at in a very simple context, it will seem to make sense. However, we don't live in a simple, one-dimensional world where a person's anecdote about race will be the single determining factor in their life. We live in a world with many different people in many different areas that will be a part of many different systems with differing levels of benefit for different reasons, and all of these will progressively shift over time. So it's a one-dimensional narrative applied to a multi-dimensional world. I found the best way to get people to understand this is to bring up investment. You have a limited amount of time, effort, and money. You can only dedicate so much of it to certain tasks, and that comes at the exclusion of other things. If there is a disproportionate fixation on one issue above others, this will come at the cost of other categories. So my question for someone, be they SJW or otherwise, is why do you consider this investment you've decided to support the worthwhile investment of your time, money, and energy, as opposed to other items you could be funding? When I was younger, attending a fundamentally religious school, I witnessed many genuine acts of prejudice, and in my attempts to address them, I received no help, no aid, nothing. I was alone. When I first told of this story to my associates in my women's studies class, some simply didn't believe me. It was not possible such events would occur in front of a white. Whites are privileged. Surely someone would have done something. How could several girls be scarlet-lettered for drinking whiskey and the white guy who complained it was unreasonable get in any trouble? Why isn't his white privilege fixing this? How could this have happened? And you're more than welcome to watch my private religious schooling series if you'd like to know more about those lovely incidents. I'll link episode 1 in the description box below this video. If you've invested in problem A and not problem B, that's your right. You're entitled to do what you want with your own time and money. However, if you aren't doing something, it's not guaranteed someone else will in your absence. When there's a fixation on what appears to be a minor concern at the exclusion of other concerns, that gives off the appearance of self-interest if one benefits from the fixation in question, and this gives off very unfriendly vibes to those that attempt to raise awareness for issues B or C and receive at best limited interest. Most of the people that I met in my women's studies class did not view things in the perspective of dedicating time and money to object A means choosing it over object B. Many had very limited economic knowledge despite having strong opinions on its pragmatism. And with the poor performance of millennials, this doesn't bode well for them being properly equipped to make such decisions. I had some success getting people to try viewing things from that angle, but education in the United States being as poor as it is, and millennials being as unqualified as they are, that's going to impact their ability to manage time, manage finances, and use the relevant economic skills. I find keeping the discussion on this has been the most useful for getting people to cooperate. Economics, finances, and math don't have a morality, they just are, and that's the most successful common ground that I've found, since only the most arrogant will claim the American school system doesn't have the problems I pointed out. Anyway, perhaps I'll make a follow-up video if people found this one interesting. Thank you for watching, insert end of video pandering here, please consider supporting me on Patreon, yada yada, and I'll see you next time.